the more we understand about what we call the molecular basis in the body and how the body works, is the more we begin to realize what you've just said, that it's not only the genetic makeup, a lot of it has to do with how we treat our bodies, what we eat, the exercise, the meditation, that we do, the spiritual aspect also, not necessarily thinking of it in the sense of a church,
No.
but in terms of, yes, you understand what I mean.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That all of those things actually contribute to well-being, to health and well-being.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from Prince George, British Columbia, the center of British Columbia, actually. We are located about 500 miles north of Vancouver. Those for our guests from around the world. Obviously, Canada, beautiful, beautiful country. And then BC, in particular, British Columbia, a very, very beautiful province. Today, we got a very special guest, Dr. Frank Douglas, who has an amazing background and has had more than 30 years involvement in medicine in some form or fashion, and is an entrepreneur, has been recognized globally and in North America. Dr. Frank, welcome to the show. You mind if I call you Frank, or?
Yeah, please.
So welcome to the show, Doc, Frank. So you have quite a background, and tell our guest and myself about where you are, where you started, and how did you end up where you are today?
Why don't I start where I started?
Okay, I like that.
Yes. I'm originally from what was British Guyana then, Guyana.
Okay.
Grew up in Georgetown, pardon me, from humble circumstances, poor circumstances. And at age 20, I received a Fulbright scholarship to come to America to go to the university. I actually came to America 60 years ago.
Oh, my.
It was actually quite interesting. It was August 20th, 1963, which turned out to be 8 days before Dr. Martin Luther King's famous March on Washington, in which he made a famous statement that he wished that someday his children would be judged by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin.
Exactly.
And why? Yes. Why this was interesting and important is that 3 days after I arrived, I was at an orientation program, participating in an orientation program for the Fulbright Fellows and Scholars at Yale, and had an experience where I was judged by the color of my skin. And it was fairly unpleasant. So sometime later, I heard that Dr. King had actually made that statement. So it had a lot of meaning for me. I went on to Lehigh University to do my bachelor's, and then did a PhD in physical chemistry. Worked for a year and a half.
Was that on Cornell University?
Yes, at Cornell. I did my PhD in physical chemistry at Cornell. Then went on to the medical school in Cornell and did an MD.
Right. And then you got your PhD from...
No, my PhD was from Cornell. I actually did a PhD first and worked for about a year and a half. And because of discrimination where I was working, I decided to go back to school and get an MD. My concept being that then I could be, my own boss.
Exactly.
Patients have my own office.
So your experience on a very young age, really, when you came to the United States, were not overly pleasant in regards of recognizing you for who you are, but somewhat because of your color. You were black, and that was not quite as accepted hence Dr. Luther King, obviously, and we watched them all, and it changed the world, and it changed North America substantially. Maybe it still got room for improvement in a lot of areas, but at least he became an example of and a leader at a young age, and then unfortunately died under the circumstances, but is well remembered, and hence we still have a national holiday every year.
Yes, yes. And I'm glad you pointed out his youth, because he was literally in his 20s when he started leading this movement and started the nonviolent approach to discrimination.
Right. And I still see the picture of them walking across the bridge. And then from that, the demand came that schools should not be discriminated in terms of color or and beyond. And but especially then, there were still situations, even then, in the early 60s, 50s, early 60s and before, where black was discriminated in terms of restaurants where they could be and not be. It was, the signs were on the door, really saying no blacks allowed. And the same if you were going in a bus, even those were discriminated in terms of location as where you could sit. And, hard to imagine that was, really looking back 50, 60 years ago. And we've come a long way, but there are still issues where there is still room for further improvement. But that made a huge difference in terms of not only North America, but in not only the United States, of changing the world and how we looked at discrimination and beyond, not only color, but also in regards to a number of other areas of discrimination. But it still affects the world to a certain extent, doesn't it?
No, it does. And, in the 50s and 60s, and actually before that time, but certainly the change started in the 60s with the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
But there was segregation. The two races were segregated, as you were describing. Blacks were not allowed to participate in certain activities where there were whites. They could not go to the same restaurants. They traveled on buses. They had to sit at the back of the bus, etc. And we have the story of Rosa Parks, who refused to get up. She was sitting towards the front of the bus and refused to get up and go and sit at the back of the bus. But I have seen tremendous changes since I've been here, tremendous improvement. In fact, I will tell you that when I went to medical school, which was in 1972, they had only 2 or 3 years prior to that begun to accept minority students, Black and Hispanics, in the predominantly white medical schools. And so this was, relatively new to have about 4 to 8% of the students in a class being from the minority groups. And many of the institutions increased the numbers, and we have seen tremendous changes. The sad thing, however, is that all seems to be reversed now. And we seem to be going back and backwards to a time of real hatred for minorities. And I find it very strange to understand why this backward step.
Yeah, and we see it across the board, right? Across the world, where minorities, whatever they may be, either by gender in some cases, and in other areas because of race or religion or choices of sexual preferences or whatever they may be, there seems to be a drift towards segregation of those, but most of the population feels either because of, I'm not sure what is driving, with all due respect, in some cases it's based on religion to a certain extent, and I'm agnostic, so I don't participate in any particular religion, but I'm not saying that that's the reason, but if you look around the world, Afghanistan and those areas where because of gender people are being depressed, and that's really not making any headway. And then even here in Canada, to a sizable extent, the First Nations people were to a certain extent discriminated against, and only now we are moving away from that and recognizing their heritage and the rights that they have. And to me, I was born in Holland in 1940, November the 1st, 1940. I actually just turned 83 a week or two ago, and we were liberated by the Canadians. I was 5 years old when the Canadian Army liberated us, April the 12th, 1945, and it made such an impression on me that I always knew that I would go to Canada, the land of my heroes, and I wanted to go when I was 17. My parents wouldn't let me then, and then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 30 months, and then I did emigrate when I was 23 in 1965, and came to Canada with nothing, a suitcase, 2 sets of clothes, didn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, and with the dream of building a company of my own, a lumber mill actually, because my grandfather was a master carpenter, and although I didn't know him, I saw his work and I was always very impressed. And my dad worked in the lumber industry, managed a small lumber company, and to me it was always that I wanted to get involved in the lumber industry. So when I came to Canada with nothing, wanted to build this lumber mill, and landed in Vancouver and went to the immigration office, and couldn't speak the English, but there was a German fellow I could speak to, and I told him what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, that's where you want to go. That's a boom town, which it was in 1965, and that's where they're building sawmills, pulp mills, and that's where the opportunities. So by the time I came here in July of 1965, I couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, and my employees gave me this actually, I had $25.47. But what I did have, was the driver, still today is the driver, attitude. I'm always thinking positive. The glass is always half full. I had passion. I love to do the things that I'm doing in the lumber industry, and I ended up building several companies, and I give it all that I get. And work ethic is the other one. I work harder than anybody, and what follows is success. So today, still my foundation is attitude, passion, work ethic. What will follow is success.
Very good. I liked your story about the suitcase because I also came with one suitcase, this little blue suitcase.
Yeah.
And what was precious in that suitcase is that a friend of my mother had bought for me a purple robe because he explained that it gets cold in America, and I would need a robe even when I'm in my room. And so I had this purple robe and one or two changes of clothing in this blue suitcase. Now, what's interesting about this is that I had totally forgotten about that suitcase, and when my older daughter, I think she was about 16 at the time, and the younger one was about 12, no, 10. I discovered that my wife had actually kept that suitcase.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yes, and in fact, would take the kids down to the basement and show them that suitcase and tell them the story of their dad coming to America with $25, actually, 25 US dollars, and this little blue suitcase. So we do have that in common.
So when you came, Frank, and you left the Caribbean, really, and the beautiful warm weather and the temperatures there, did you come alone? And did you know anybody? And you came to New York or wherever you came. Did you know anybody there or?
No, I arrived in New York City one night. The next morning, they put me on the bus to New Haven, where I was for 2 weeks for the orientation program,
Okay.
and then on to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, to Lehigh University. I think it was about 18 months thereafter that I actually learned of someone whose parents I knew very well in Guyana, and they had invited me to come and spend some time with them. But that was the first time I met anyone from Guyana. So for about 18 months, in fact, the first Christmas, I was alone on the campus. I was the only student on the campus because I had no place to go. And it's a wonderful story because one day I got a call, and was one of the deans on the phone who said, there is a woman in the town who would like to invite a student for dinner. And someone had told him there was a student actually in this building I was in, and would I be interested? And I was very interested because, as a matter of fact, I was out of money and didn't have anything to eat. So,
Perfect.
I had a great dinner, and it was getting it was cold then, and I didn't have winter clothing, and she handled it very nicely. She didn't make me feel badly about it, but the following day she came and took me to the store and bought me a winter coat and a couple of suits, etc.
Amazing how those things that made such a difference to you at a time that you needed it, that didn't necessarily would be very normal for other individuals, and I would do that even today, but I remember the same as you did. There was a period of 10 days that I had nothing to eat, stood in the front of the school of Salvation Army, too proud to go in, and then somebody said to me, do you want a coffee? I said, and I would never do that before, would you mind if I asked for a piece of pie as well? Because I haven't eaten in a week and a half, and so, and I still remember that as well. So you did your schooling, you got your entrance into the university. So you then from there, and then how long were you in the university? How old were you when you were 20 when you left
I was
Guyana?
20.
Yeah.
Yes, I was 20. I finished my bachelor's in 3 years. Normally, it's a 4-year program.
Right.
I completed it in 3 years, and went on as till and did a PhD,
Right.
and worked for a year and a half at Xerox, actually, as a scientist. Had some problems, could not get a good project because of discrimination. And as I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
I decided to go to medical school.
Right.
And when I went to medical school, it was interesting. They had given me acceptance into medical school. And as they told me at the time, they were not expecting me to practice medicine. What they really wanted was for me to learn medicine and then go back into the lab using my physical chemistry to work on the medically important problems. And that's basically what I started doing until I was an assistant professor at the University of Chicago's medical school when I was discovered by the pharmaceutical industry. I'd done a couple of studies which had brought me to their attention, and was invited to do basically a sabbatical at a company called Ciba-Geigy. It's now called Novartis. And that started my career in the pharmaceutical industry.
So how old were you there, Frank? When that
When I went to the pharmaceutical industry, I would have been 40.
Okay. Were you already married then, or when did you
Yes.
meet your wife?
Yes. Actually, my wife is from Guyana.
Okay.
And
Did you
yes.
know her before you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
We knew each other when we were teenagers.
Then
But actually, I taught high school. It was very typical in Guyana. After you'd completed your exams, we did what are called the GC O levels and A level exams. And if you had done well in them, you often got a position in the small high schools to teach. And so I met my wife. She was also a teacher in the same school where I was teaching.
what's the name?
Her name is Lynette.
Lynette.
Yes.
And I know already you have 2 daughters. Do you have more than how
No,
many?
I have 3. I have 3 daughters. Yeah. Mhm.
Can you tell us their names, or do you mind?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, they're Katrina, Nataki, and Dia.
Okay, and what are they doing? Are they
One is in real estate, and the other 2 are physicians. One is a physician scientist, and the other actually works for a pharmaceutical company. She's a medical director in a pharmaceutical company.
so they kind of followed their dad in their careers, right?
Yes.
Save and
Yeah,
except for the oldest one going to real estate,
yes.
but so that's very interesting, and so the background that you had is getting the entrance into the university. Kind of, you must have been doing very well in school and subsequently in university, because obviously, you have your doctorates and your PhD. And the other thing that I noticed in your career, you're being recognized for numerous different awards. The Global Pharmaceutical Research Development Director Year Award 2001, 2004. What would that be for? Is that recognized North America?
I was it was global. It was a global position.
Yeah.
I was the head. It was executive vice president and member of the board of management, responsible for research, development, and regulatory affairs of a global pharmaceutical company. And that award was for the research and development directors, and I was twice identified as one of the leaders, one of the best of the research directors.
Amazing.
Well, as I tell, I was very fortunate in a real sense. I had tremendously talented scientists. It was a global company, scientists from the U.S., from Germany, from France, from Japan. The way I organized the different disciplines that we had and the therapeutic areas in which we worked, I took advantage of the diversity of talent and cultures and the different approaches. And I think as a result, that created a very innovative environment, which led to many important drugs that are now on the market.
This is amazing because to me it sounds entrepreneurial. You not only have the ability that you established in your university education as a medical doctor and then a chemistry, but you had to acquire, or you probably already had the ability to see. Being entrepreneurial takes a certain skill sets that is not easily taught. You either have it or you don't. And I kind of think, looking at your recognition and the things that you did, you were very proactive and very forward-looking in a lot of things.
Yes, as a matter of fact, part of the reason why, on both occasions, I was recognized for the award as the Research and Development Director of the Year. A lot of it had to do with the types of things I introduced in the ways in which we did research and development, and I did introduce some different ways in which to organize, in which people work together. One of the very important ones, actually, which is interesting, I was actually one of the first people to work on the concept and to introduce the concept that was very important to understand the individual, to understand, now we know the genomic of the individual, and to tailor drugs specifically for individuals based on their genomic composition. We didn't have the genomics at the time when I began, but there were other parameters that you could use to really identify individuals as having special characteristics and basically tailoring your drugs to those characteristics for those individuals. That has become, I call it clinical biology. That's when I first joined the industry. I introduced that concept. That's become personalized medicine and now precision medicine. But it started way back then with my talking about clinical biology. I had another opportunity. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just going to go back to what you were saying. If you said genomic, what does that mean?
Genomics has to do with the genes.
Okay, and of the individual?
Yes, the genes of the individual, the DNA and the characteristics that those genes have and how those genes express themselves, both chemically in the real sense, the chemicals they produce, be they hormones or be they certain types of what we call receptors. But basically, it's the genetic makeup of an individual and how those genes operate within that individual via the chemicals that they produce in that individual.
Okay, so
one can characterize that.
Yeah, and so what I find interesting about it is actually I'm very interested in that because a lot of things that are happening now is that where we as individuals and that have no particular background in it, but we are becoming more aware of physical well-being, staying physically fit. I'm actually writing a book. I've written several books, and I'll show some of them to you, is that living young, dying old. And that is basically trying to, it's not about the age, it's the quality of life. And I believe both my wife, myself, my wife is vegan. I'm probably 80-20, but we are trying to maintain physical fitness, both not only physical, body-wise, but also mentally, and being very conscientious of diet, and saying that this amazing body that we got is very forgiving, but to become knowledgeable about how can we stay fit and healthy, I believe a lot of things are happening where we become much more proactive in understanding more and more about our bodies in terms of different medical approaches to not just the traditional, take an Advil and then, just and being abusive of our bodies, but becoming more knowledgeable. And so that how can we live longer and have quality of life?
Yeah, and the more we understand about what we call the molecular basis in the body and how the body works, is the more we begin to realize what you've just said, that it's not only the genetic makeup. A lot of it has to do with how we treat our bodies, what we eat, the exercise, the meditation, that we do, the spiritual aspect also, not necessarily thinking of it in the sense of a church,
No.
but in terms of, yes, you understand what I mean.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That all of those things actually contribute to well-being, to health and well-being. And there clearly is a difference between what we call the chronological age and the biological age. I'm actually 80 this year. And you're 83, I'm 80.
Yeah.
So there are some people who at 80 look as though they're 100.
Correct.
And there are some of us who at 80, we are still vibrant and we operate as though we are 60.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I'm doing even now. I'm very active in entrepreneurship that I'm doing. I have a number of 6 or 7, 8 different companies, and I usually still get up at 5:30 in the mornings, and I always feel I'm late, and I'm always in the hurry to get to work. And it comes to attitude, passion, work ethic, and then the other thing that I'm doing, Frank, is that. And it is obvious that you look in good shape, so am I. And that I'm very conscientious of my body in terms of diet. I go to the gym and I work out. I'm actually competitive. I believe I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America at 83.
Oh, wow.
So, and qualified for the Arnolds and then COVID came. Now I'm going again to the gym and hope to compete again in 24. But the reason that I do is I enjoy going to the gym. I like being fit, and it gives me a goal to work towards. And then the other part about it is that my wife is also very, very proactive. And understanding the medical system and the things around it, or the medical, not so much system, but in terms of, but she reads a lot, watches a lot on YouTube and on the internet in terms of new ideas, new approaches to the how do we stay fit, how do we become more conscientious of our hormones, and how does a system work, and how can we feel good in the longer term. And again, it comes to my book, Living Young, Dying Old. It's coming out next July, actually, so.
Yeah, very good. I look for it. I look forward to seeing it.
Yes. And then, so now the other things that I saw, you were also Black History Maker Award in 2007. What was that all about, other than the obvious?
Well, it was the reason I'm laughing is the following. When I was called to tell me that I'd been selected for this award, I really thought it was a joke. And the reason I thought that is that I'm Guyanese American. I am not a full-blooded Black American. I'm Caribbean American. And believe it or not, is that there is sometimes differences that are identified. And so non-Afro-Americans, or I should say, I'll put it this way, Blacks who have come from Africa or from the Caribbean, who are living and working in America, are sometimes seen differently by Black Americans who are born in America, who were born and grew up in America.
Right.
And so many times there were awards that were given to Blacks, but I did not qualify in a real sense because I was not a native Black American. So when I caught this call, I was really quite surprised. The second reason that it was interesting is that the person who called me said, your name had come up 2 or 3 times before, but because of your background and because of the level at which you've been operating, everyone said, oh, no, he's not Black, he's white.
Oh, my goodness.
I was at MIT at the time, and a previous awardee who was on the committee that was looking at the candidates that year was a graduate of MIT, gotten her PhD from MIT, very distinguished scientist, and she said, "Oh no, he's Black. He's at MIT. I know him." And so they told me that story. But it was because, one, I was actually the first Black to be on the board of management of a global pharmaceutical company. At that time it was top 3. It's now about top 5 global pharmaceutical company. And as you have seen, I have been very fortunate and that I've been successful both in academy, in the university setting, as well as in industry. And so I was unusual at that time for a Black male. As I've said to many people, look, fortunately, I had the opportunity, and fortunately, I had the courage to deal with the issues that came up, and I was not dissuaded. I just persisted. But there are many Black men and women who could be sitting where I'm sitting and doing what I'm doing. They just either have not had the opportunity or did not persist in the face of discrimination and discouragement.
And that's the key, Frank, is where you stayed the course, regardless of what happened along the side, although obviously it affected you in a way as you look back to initially when you started at Cornell and but discriminated against, but you did not let it stop you in terms of where you were going. And the other thing that I find...
sorry. I was going to say, this is why, as a matter of fact, my book that I recently published, which is entitled Until You Walk in My Shoes, and subtitled A Reframing Methodology to Overcome Systemic Discrimination. It occurred to me that about 5 years ago, I wrote my memoirs. And as I was writing my memoirs, something became very clear to me, and that is that many times when I was faced with problems, particularly problems of discrimination, I did what I reframed the problem. Rather than dealing with that problem head on, I tried to find a better problem to solve. And a better problem is a problem which, when a solution is found, it not only takes care of my problem, but it improves the lot of my colleagues. And so I would look for those types of situations and address those situations. And by addressing those situations, my situation was addressed. And it was not as confrontational. My managers didn't have to be defensive because I was focusing on what was better for the group and the productivity of the group. And then saying, by the way, if we got this done, it would also solve a problem that I'm facing.
But I find...
And so...
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, my actually describes that process. And I'm really trying now, given the tenor that we have right now, with the increase of discrimination in the various areas, be it gender, be it ethnicity, be it sexual orientation, etc., religion, there is such a rise of bias and prejudice, etc., that I think that this approach that I use that helped me tremendously and made me successful could probably be used by others. And so that's why I wrote the book.
See, what I find unique about you as an example is that your skill sets is obvious, right? You have outstanding, amazing skill sets that you have developed, and it's obvious in the things that you have done, the credentials that you have, the recognition that you got, and that what you have accomplished, either entrepreneurship or as a scientist, with all the things that you have, those are colorblind that
Yes.
judge you as to who you are, not what you are, or saying, he's this, that, or the other thing. No, they far go beyond that, and they are colorblind. And that's why you recognize for who you are and what you have accomplished. Nothing to do with where you came from, but color or all the other things. But they are colorblind, and they speak for themselves,
Yeah, that's correct.
And I find amazing also, you were recognized in the Caribbean Heritage Award for entrepreneurship in 2011. And that's the other part that, as I said earlier, I'm an entrepreneur, and I recognize entrepreneurship and all the things that you did, from scientific approach, your PhD, your MD, and all the things that you did, and the amazing record that you have at the university. But pulled it all together for you is a natural ability of entrepreneurship, which you cannot be taught. Either you have it or you don't have it. That made it also unique in a way. So the other...
I do. I do agree. I came to that realization when I was an actual card-carrying entrepreneur, in the sense that I was running a startup biotech company and would be recognized as an entrepreneur, and suddenly realized that indeed the characteristics that I brought to that were the characteristics that I had all along when I was in large companies or when I was in academia in the university. The idea of risk taking, the notion of looking at things from a different perspective. I used to tell people I look for the white spaces and look for the areas where others have not gone. And I tell young people, for example, because it's something which I did, that and it is almost the creed, I think, of the entrepreneur. There's no such thing as failure. When we do something, when we do an experiment, for example, one of three things happen. You either get the result you expected, okay, big deal, or you get an unwanted result, an unwanted outcome, and you go, ooh, didn't want that, or an unexpected outcome. One of those three things happen.
Correct.
It turns out that the latter two, when you pursue those two, those are the ones that lead to breakthroughs. Those are the ones that lead to new things and new ideas. The first is okay; it confirms what you thought, etc., and that's fine. And so when we did experiments and people didn't get the outcome that they wanted or they expected, and they were very unhappy, I would always ask, okay, let's talk about the result that we have. Okay, not that the result that you wanted, the result that you have. What is it telling us? And given what it's telling us, where is the opportunity? Where can that be applied? Perhaps it cannot be applied where we wanted to apply it, not in the therapeutic area, where we were focused, but perhaps it's an opportunity in a different therapeutic area. And it may be that we're not the ones to do it, this particular team. We pass it on to the other team.
Correct.
That's focused in.
But recognizing the opportunity or the other opportunity that it could have is that requires the entrepreneurship in recognizing that, and then saying, let some others go forward with it. And that obviously in your particular case developed amazing results. And that's what I was particularly saying, is that you, as a scientist and having your doctors and PhD, all those things worked well, but it laid the foundation to pull it all together with the entrepreneurial natural ability that you had developed. But I always say, like for myself, is that have a unique quality is that being able to look forward to the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years and saying, I need to know, where do we go from here? What will it look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Yes. And that again takes a different quality that a lot of people do not have, and it's somewhat unique. The other thing that I was going to mention to you, contrary to you, I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And so then my parents in Holland said, well, what are we going to do with this guy? And they were beautiful people. And so they said, well, maybe send him to the school for the mentally challenged. Fortunately, they didn't do that. And so they said, well, maybe we have to get him a trade. And so they sent me to a furniture factory, and I became a furniture maker. And then in the evenings, I would go to the college and become a furniture maker. What happens, though, is that the friends that I grew up with, that I knew that went on to college and university, I became a laborer. And I'm proud of that now, but then being a laborer was kind of looked down at. And then the other part that happened is that I always wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And then combining it with that, my dream was that obviously, as I said earlier, we were liberated by the Canadians April the 12th, 1945, and I always knew I wanted to go to the land of my heroes. That was my dream. The other dream that I had is I wanted to prove to myself that I could do things just as well as others. I just was not very good in school. And, so I started here, left Holland with one suitcase, as I said earlier, and $150, and then ended up here in Prince George with my $25.47, and I was going to build a lumber mill. And I did, very quickly. I learned the language, then became a superintendent at a mill, and then already within 2 years, I had an option at buying a lumber mill or portion of a mill, and then gradually build my companies. And then I still felt that I had failed, inside of me. And then people said to me, you should write a book about your life. It's been so interesting to what your background. And so the one thing that was the key for me is that in 1990, I was not very good at communicating. And so I could communicate with a small group that I was close to, but to larger groups, that didn't work well for me. And somebody mentioned to me, an ex-sister-in-law, actually, she dragged me to an organization called Toastmasters.
Uh-huh.
And I went down there, and the first meeting, I said to her, what do they do there? Because I don't want them to ask me any questions. She said, don't worry about it. You just sit there, you watch it. And so that's what I did. And during the middle of the meeting, one said to me, okay, John, tell us about you. And I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. So I did. I stayed there for 10 years, and I became a distinguished Toastmaster, and it changed my life. And now I'm a professional speaker. I do podcasting and obviously all the other things. But at the same time, what happened during that period, in 1997, I was already here for 32 years. I walked into a store here, a bookstore, and I picked up a book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction. And I looked at it, and it talked about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, now I know who I am. And I bought the book, and I wrote in the book in Dutch because I was ashamed of it, because the stigma was, it's a mental problem, right? Mm-hmm. I wrote in the book in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am. And so then tying the things together and coming back to so now already I was successful. When I saw the book, said, okay, now I know what happened. Add to that Toastmasters, so it kind of opened me up. I already was successful in business, and then I felt I had to write about it. And so the first book, I never wrote a book in my life, and as you know, writing books is not easy necessarily. And so I wrote this book, Against All Odds, and it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And it's about all the ups and downs that I went through, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I did that. And then after that, it was quite successful, actually. Then I became more vocal about ADHD because I had checked it out. I know from that the frequency of occurrence may be as high, was considered to be 8%. I believe it's more like 20%, if not more. And I started speaking about it. And then I felt I had to write a book about it. And I did. I wrote this book about it, ADHD Unlocked. quite popular. And it's not only for those that have difficulty in our traditional learning environment, where they sit in 4 years in school and then, then really have difficulty to really paying attention. And
Yes.
and so, but it's not only ADHD, it's not only for people that have ADHD, but it's also for people affected by trauma or other reasons that doesn't make them function well in an
Yes.
organized setting. So I
Yeah.
did that, and so for me it was ADHD, and obviously at my traditional learning environment didn't affect me. I focused more on things that I like to do, and that then, since that time, even when I was 62, my companies have grown substantially. I've become an author, I'm a public speaker, and obviously quite successful as a podcaster as well.
Fantastic. And, knowing who we are is just so important, and understanding, why we do the things that we do and why we seem not to be able to do some things. Understanding that is in a way, it liberates one and
Correct.
enables to be authentic and to be one's authentic self.
And the other part about it, Frank, is sharing it with others. And that's what I
Yes.
found to be very, very important. I like speaking about it, not only ADHD, but entrepreneurship and all the other things, and sharing it with others. That's why I like podcasting. That's why I wrote the books. The other book that I wrote, I showed it to you earlier, is Finding Your Passion, and Living the Dream. And then I'm working on 2 other books right now as well that come out next year. And I love it. And, but sharing it with others is important. And then,
Yes.
especially with young people in particular, that saying, be so conscientious, how do we look, what do we wear, and all the other things of people not being happy or feeling they are just not good enough. I say, reconcile with yourself. Everyone in particular is unique in terms of who they are and special. There's nobody else like you, and be at peace with who you are, and then look around us. Be so blessed by, especially the way the world is today, is with a lot of challenges and a lot of problems. As an individual, is to try to pursue opportunity as you did, recognize opportunity that you may have, is that either in a career, entrepreneurship, or academics, or whatever, make it well, do it well, and then attitude, passion, work ethic, what follows this success.
No, it's very interesting that you say that. Ever so often, young people would ask me the question. They would say, "Well, when did you know you were going to be who you are now, and how did you prepare yourself for that?" And so I say to them, "Well, let me tell you very briefly my background. I come from poor country, poor family. I come to America. I started out in chemical engineering. I fell in love with physical chemistry. I thought I was going to be one of the best professors in the university in physical chemistry. Then I end up going to medical school, and I end up becoming a physician scientist. And whilst doing that, an opportunity arose to go to the pharmaceutical company. And now I spent 24 years in the pharmaceutical company, rising up through the ranks and being an expert in the researching, developing, and putting drugs on the market. And I left that and went back to the university, working on innovation and entrepreneurship, etc., in the field of bioinnovation. I said, I tell you all of that for you to now ask yourself the question, how does one prepare oneself for that? You can't. So what did I do? What I did is whatever I was doing at the time, I did it as well as I could and to the best of my ability.
Give it
And
120%.
Yes, I said, and what I discovered is that because I had done that, that when I was doing something else, things that I had learned in another discipline would come flooding in, and I would see these relationships as one manager and boss of mine said to me, you're just a natural lateral thinker. You see things that others don't see. And I said, the reason is because even though I may not have been good in a particular subject, I nonetheless did it as well as I could, and I tried to understand it. So the elements of it stayed with me, and I could see it in other things that I was doing.
Exactly.
So I said, you become the miracle that you actually are.
Exactly.
That's what you have to do. Work hard work, perseverance, and you will become the miracle that you actually are.
And never give up and believe that you can,
Yes. Never give up.
Dr. Frank Douglas.
So we have those things in common.
Yeah. Dr. Frank Douglas, PhD, it was a pleasure to podcast you. And I'm going to send you copies of my books. And
please do. I will also do the same.
And we'll stay in touch.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay. Thank you for the podcast.
I tell you one last story before we go, because it touched me, and because I understand the challenge of learning a language. I actually, when I became global head of research and development for this large company, it was Hertz, which then became Hertz, Marcel, Aventis, etc.
Right.
I moved to Frankfurt to be the global head of research and development, and started learning German. And much to my surprise, I actually became fluent within 6 months.
Well,
people were stunned. I was more stunned than they, because I had absolutely no idea that I had any facility in learning a language. And I'm still fluent. In German. And so, but one of the things that it did, it made me understand one thing, and that is, because someone speaks a language doesn't necessarily mean that they always understand what is being said.
Correct.
I was just stunned to be sitting in meetings. I recognized every word that was being said in German, but didn't understand the meaning.
Right. How to connect it, right? So, So, Frank, now you're 80, so you're still active.
Yes.
And you intend to stay active. People ask
Absolutely.
me, when are you retiring? I said, to do what? So I want to stay healthy, fit, and still have the energy, and I like what I'm doing. And obviously, it is obvious that you do as well. So, Frank, I really enjoyed our podcast, and we'll stay in touch.
Yes, that's and thank you for the opportunity and the privilege of getting to meet you and to know you.
Okay, and the same applies to me. It was a privilege. Thanks, Frank. Take care.
You take care.
Okay, bye.